Grandma's recipes, the forgotten art of healing foods. When people talk about wisdom, they often think of books, degrees, and teachers who stand in front of blackboards. Yet, there is another kind of wisdom, older and quieter, the type that comes from life itself. It is the knowledge of hands that have kneaded bread for decades, of eyes that have watched seasons change from the same kitchen window, and of hearts that have healed children not only with medicine, but with warm meals served in clay bowls. This was the wisdom my grandmother carried, and it came alive most vibrantly in the sacred ritual she called Grandma's recipes. Her kitchen was not grand. It had no gleaming marble countertops or expensive appliances. The walls were slightly faded, the cupboards smelled faintly of wood and spice, and the stove creaked each time it was lit. But for me, stepping into that space was like stepping into another world. It was a world where food was not just food, where meals were not just survival, but where everything that entered your mouth carried a story, a cure, and a blessing. She often said, "There is no true medicine without food, and no true food without care." That belief is what made her recipes so unique. They weren't just instructions written in a notebook. They were living traditions, whispered from generation to generation, wrapped in folklore, shaped by trials of illness and recovery, and polished by her endless patience. She had a way of looking at ingredients as if they were friends, as if garlic, ginger, and rice were loyal allies standing beside her in a lifelong battle against sickness, fatigue, and despair. To her, they weren't objects in the pantry. They were healers. And that is why her collection of dishes was known in the family as healing foods. Healing foods, where science meets soul. The idea of food as healing is not new. Today, doctors and nutritionists talk about antioxidants, fibers, probiotics, and vitamins. But for my grandmother, these were things she had felt in her bones long before anyone wrote them in textbooks. She understood balance instinctively. If you had a fever, she would prepare a cooling soup of cucumber and mint. If you had the flu, she would crush cloves of garlic and mix them with honey until the bitterness was drowned in sweetness. If your stomach felt heavy, she would brew tea from fennel seeds that made you feel lighter in minutes. One of her most famous remedies, however, was tied to a very common problem that few wanted to talk about: constipation. Children giggled when she mentioned it, adults blushed, and visitors politely tried to change the subject. But my grandmother never shied away. She said, "The body speaks in silence, and constipation is one of its loudest silences." That was when she would bring out her secret weapon, brown rice for constipation. Now you must understand, in a world dominated by white rice, soft bread, and processed flour, the idea of brown rice was almost rebellious. Most people in our family preferred white rice because it was faster to cook, softer to chew, and prettier on the plate. But Grandma would shake her head and insist that the outer layers of the grain, the parts stripped away in white rice, were where the magic truly lived. Those layers carried the fiber, the earthy taste, and the healing power that modern kitchens so often discarded. Brown rice for constipation. More than a dish. She would prepare the brown rice slowly, washing it 3 times until the water ran almost clear, then soaking it for hours to soften the stubborn grains. When it finally cooked, the house would fill with a nutty, comforting aroma that made you feel cared for even before you tasted it. She would serve it warm, sometimes with sesame seeds sprinkled on top, sometimes with lentils, and sometimes with just a drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of salt. Eating it was not just about solving a problem of the body. It was about participating in her philosophy. She taught us that digestion was not only about food passing through the body, it was about how gently we treated ourselves. Rushed meals, mindless chewing, processed sugars, and late-night snacking were not just bad habits. To her, they were signs of disconnection from life itself. She believed that eating brown rice slowly, savoring each bite, was a practice of returning to harmony with nature. And indeed, her remedy worked. Anyone in the family who followed her advice found their discomfort ease, their body lighter, their spirit calmer. She often joked, "Doctors may prescribe pills, but I prescribe rice." And beneath the humor was a truth as solid as the grains in her hand. Science later confirmed what she already knew, that brown rice, with its abundance of insoluble fiber, stimulates the intestines, adds bulk to the stool, and prevents the sluggishness that makes people suffer in silence. Yet, Grandma didn't need studies to validate her. Her proof was in the faces of her children and grandchildren, relieved and smiling after following her simple yet powerful advice. Grandma's fiber, the hidden key. If there was one word that carried weight in her kitchen, it was fiber. She said it like it was a sacred term, a hidden key to longevity and health. She explained it not in the dry, clinical way of modern nutritionists, but through metaphors that even a child could understand. Fiber, she would say, is the broom of the body. It sweeps the passages clean, clears the dust of yesterday's meals, and prepares you for tomorrow. Her collection of what she called Grandma's fiber was not limited to brown rice. She used oats in porridge, barley in soups, beans in stews, chia seeds in puddings, and fruits in every color of the rainbow. Apples, pears, figs, and prunes were her favorite allies. She insisted that each one had a role to play: apples for cleansing, pears for cooling, figs for strengthening, prunes for softening. She even had a playful way of making us remember. An apple keeps you light, a pear keeps you bright, a fig makes you strong, and a prune keeps you going along. What amazed me most was how she combined these foods not just for function but for joy. Eating her meals never felt like medicine. It felt like love. She didn't force you to gulp down fiber like a punishment. She transformed it into cakes, porridges, and even sweet jams. That was the essence of her genius. She wrapped health inside comfort so that children, adults, and elders alike could receive healing without even realizing it. Lessons beyond the kitchen. As I grew older, I began to see that Grandma's recipes were not simply about solving digestive issues or preventing illness. They were about teaching a way of life. She taught patience by soaking beans overnight, mindfulness by stirring soup slowly, gratitude by blessing the earth that grew her vegetables, and resilience by showing that even the simplest foods could carry immense power. One evening, while watching her stir a pot of lentils, I asked her why she never wrote her recipes down. She smiled, tapped her heart, and said, "The recipe is not in the notebook. It is in the living. You learn it when you live it, when you respect food, when you taste with your soul, not just your tongue." That answer stayed with me. It explained why her dishes never tasted the same when someone else tried to copy them. They lacked the ingredient that could not be measured: her spirit. Her belief in healing, her deep connection to nature, her fierce commitment to family, these were the spices no one could buy. A legacy of healing. Today, as I stand in my own kitchen, far away from the little wooden cupboards of her home, I often find myself recreating her recipes. I wash the brown rice, soak it, and let its aroma remind me of her voice. I stir honey into garlic, brew fennel tea, and slice apples the way she used to. And each time I feel that I am not cooking alone. She is there, guiding my hands, reminding me that health is not complicated, that healing is not hidden in distant hospitals or expensive treatments, but often in the humble foods that sit quietly in our kitchens. Her legacy lives on not only in the meals I prepare, but in the way I approach life. Whenever I feel rushed, I hear her saying, "Slow down, or you'll choke on more than food." Whenever I doubt the value of simplicity, I remember her laughter as she served rice instead of pills. And whenever I long for comfort, I remember that the true secret of her recipes was not the ingredients, but the love she poured into them. Conclusion. The eternal recipe. In the end, my grandmother's kitchen was more than a place of cooking. It was a sanctuary of wisdom, healing, and love. Through Grandma's recipes, she gave us not only meals, but medicine, not only nourishment, but guidance. Through her philosophy of healing foods, she showed us that nature always provides what we need if we only listen. Through her insistence on brown rice for constipation, she reminded us that even the most common problems have simple, natural solutions. And through the treasure she called Grandma's fiber, she revealed the secret to keeping the body clean, light, and resilient. Her voice still echoes in my memory, gentle yet firm. Food is life, and life is sacred. Never eat in a hurry, never eat without respect, and never forget that healing begins on the plate. And so, whenever I serve a bowl of brown rice, whenever I share a piece of fruit with my children, whenever I prepare a simple soup with beans and greens, I feel as though I am continuing her story. A story that began long before I was born, and one that will, I hope, continue long after I am gone. Because her recipes were not just about food, they were about living. And in every grain of rice, in every spoon of fiber, in every whispered blessing, I can still taste her love.